Hi guys, I'm going to be reading you Run the Show Like CEO Oprah Winfrey, written by Caroline Moss. Chapter 1. Oprah's Early Childhood. The Little Preacher. Oprah Winfrey sat on the steps outside her grandmother's farmhouse in Kosciuszko, Mississippi, inspecting the dress she had been given to wear that morning. She was only 4 years old, not even old enough to go to school. But she knew she was different from the other children she would see in town and at church. While other girls wore pretty cotton dresses in hues of blue or yellow or pink, Oprah's dress was made out of a potato sack. Her grandmother, Hattie Mae Lee, had fashioned it for her. They were very poor, and at £2, pretty dresses were too expensive for Hattie Mae to buy. Hattie Mae, like Oprah, was black, and in the 1950s, being a black woman in the South meant you didn't have a lot of opportunities to get good jobs that paid good money. It also meant that white people treated you differently, like you were less worthy of a good life because of the color of your skin. And so Oprah was made fun of by the other kids for being a poor black girl who wore potato sack dresses. They called her Sack Girl. Oprah clutched her corn cob doll tightly and thought about her mother, Vernita Lee. She hadn't seen her mother for a few years. Vernita had been a teenager when she had Oprah on the 29th January 1954, and she didn't have a job to support herself or her daughter. She went north to find work as a maid, but she couldn't bring Oprah with her, so Oprah lived with Hattie Mae on the farm. Oprah knew her life was harder for her because of the color of her skin. Her grandmother was born in 1900, a revolutionary time for black people in America. Slavery had been abolished, but segregation and discrimination were still deep-rooted in the country, especially in the South. Though Hattie Mae was not born a slave, she was often treated like a lesser human by the white people she worked for. And yet Hattie Mae would tell Oprah that she should hope to grow up to work for some good white folks who would sometimes spare her leftovers from their dinner table. It seems like an awful thing to say to a little girl now, but remember that back then, this paltry offering of food to a woman who worked long hours for you and your family was seen as a radical act of kindness from a white person to a black person. Hattie Mae could not imagine a world where she might hope to be treated any better, and so she couldn't imagine one for Oprah either. It was hard to make friends when you were a sack girl. Oprah watched a cockroach run back and forth across the front steps and wondered how long it would be until Hattie Mae would finish washing the white people's clothes in the basin of hot water and help Oprah with her reading and writing. Oprah loved reading and writing, and Hattie Mae thought Oprah was a wonderful reader and writer. But more than that, Oprah loved to talk. She could talk all day and never tire of it. Every Sunday, Hattie Mae would take Oprah to a church, while other children Oprah's age would fuss around and get antsy. Oprah listened intently to the words being spoken. Soon she was asked to recite verses in front of the whole congregation. She was never nervous. She loved that everyone was listening to what she had to say. It made her feel special, like she was a voice worth listening to. Hattie May, the old ladies at the church would say, that child is gifted. Other kids might have called her Sack Girl, but the church congregation started to call her Little Preacher. And Oprah, even though she was only 4, knew she wanted to grow up and get paid to talk. I regret my grandmother did not live to see I've got some good white folks working for me, Oprah would say decades later. I know what it feels like to be abandoned, to not be wanted, to not be loved, and yet have inside yourself a yearning, a passion, a desire, a hope for something better. Oprah. I remember specific moments watching my grandmother hang the clothes on the line and her saying to me, "You're going to have to learn to do this," and me being in that space of awareness and knowing that my life would not be the same as my grandmother's life. Oprah. Chapter 2. Growing Up. Life with Hattie May, even though they didn't have any money, was good for Oprah. Hattie May was supportive and loving. She encouraged her granddaughter to do her very best. She provided structure and routine to Oprah's life, which is important when you are a child, and especially important when you have goals and dreams like Oprah did. When it came to reading and writing, Oprah flourished so much that she was able to skip ahead a school year. The future was looking bright. But when Oprah was 6, Hattie May became ill and could no longer take care of her granddaughter. Oprah had to move north to Milwaukee and live with her mother, who had taken work as a maid. In the time since her mother had left, she had given birth to another daughter named Patricia, who she seemed to love more than she loved Oprah. When Oprah arrived at the Milwaukee boarding house where her mother lived, she felt alone and abandoned. The house was run-down and unfamiliar. It was cold. Oprah missed Hattie May terribly. She barely knew her mother. She wanted to return to her grandmother, to the farm. She would even wear a sack dress if it meant she could go back home. 6-year-old Oprah tried to reason with herself. After all, she thought, at least she had a place to sleep. Many people didn't have a place to sleep. But then came an unimaginable turn of events. On her first night at the boarding house, Oprah was told she was not allowed to sleep inside because of her skin was too dark. Her half-sister Patricia had much lighter skin, and so she was afforded the comfort of a roof over her head. But 6-year-old Oprah was sent to sleep outside on the porch alone. Oprah tried really hard to make the best of her time with her mother, but it wasn't the same as being with Hattie May. Vanita hardly knew her daughter, having left her behind at such a young age, and Vanita was working long, exhausting hours without much pay. Vanita didn't have time to spend with Oprah on reading and writing like Hattie May did, and she didn't much care that her daughter seemed to have a special gift. There would be no more preaching at the church and no more impressing the older ladies in the front row who called her the little preacher. Instead, Oprah found herself in terrible situations. The people in her life, both family members and friends of her family, were not nice to Oprah. They abused her and treated her horribly. Oprah felt so alone. She had a hard time concentrating on the things that used to make her happy back on the farm with Hattie Mae. Soon Vernita grew impatient with trying to raise 2 daughters and work long hours cleaning houses. Oprah's prayers were about to be answered. She was temporarily sent to live with her father, Vernon. He was much more supportive of Oprah and had more time for her. He encouraged her growth in reading and writing and speaking, and he was strict in a good way. But it wouldn't last for long. She had to hold on to the hope that one day things would get better. Back and forth, Oprah was shuttled between Vernon and Vernita for nearly a decade. She craved stability, craved just one place she could call home. Oprah then began her high school education under Vernita's parenting in Milwaukee, but was constantly getting into trouble. Most teenagers argue with their parents, but Oprah and Vernita took arguing to a new level. Oprah had even figured out how to steal money from her mother so she could try to imitate the lifestyles of the richer girls at school. She was still made fun of for being poor, and she would do anything to make the name calling and harassment end, even if she knew deep down that stealing was wrong. Soon Vernita threw up her hands and sent 14-year-old Oprah back to live with her father permanently in Tennessee. Chapter 3: A Bright Future Ahead. High school, under the guidance of her father, proved to be just what Oprah needed. He was strict, which was good. He made sure she got good grades and that she wasn't letting drama with friends or with boys get in the way of her studies. He even made Oprah read 1 book a week, separate from her school assignments, and write a report on it. That was strict, but it helped Oprah become an even stronger reader and writer, and maybe most importantly, a more independent thinker. It was at this point that Oprah read a book that would change her outlook on life. Maya Angelou's autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, spoke to Oprah and the theme of a young black girl's experience growing up in America was like a mirror reflecting back on her teenage self. This book came to her at a time when she saw very little representation of black women in position of power, of education, and of respect. Maya's message was proof that Oprah's dreams were not silly or a waste of time, that they could truly be a reality if she believed in their power. So 16-year-old Oprah made a big decision. I'm going to go for my dreams, she thought, and no one will get in my way. Oprah thought about all of the things she was really good at: reading, public speaking, writing, and of course being part of the drama and debate teams at school. Then she thought about which of those things she really loved. The answer was obvious: public speaking. Remember when Oprah was little and she would go to church to captivate audiences of adults and children alike? Remember the little old ladies in church who would say, "Hattie Mae, that child is gifted." Oprah wondered if that was still true more than 10 years later, so she entered a speaking competition. Oprah wasn't nervous when it was her turn to speak at the competition. She felt at home when she was talking in front of crowds. She knew she was writing her own future by listening to the voice deep down inside of her, guiding her towards what she would later call her truth. Oprah won the speaking competition and the grand prize, a 4-year scholarship to the University of Tennessee. This was such a huge opportunity for Oprah. University was expensive, and up until she won the scholarship, she didn't know how she was going to pay for it. She thought about Hattie Mae and how she had only wanted Oprah to live up to her highest potential. There are lots of ways to become successful, and they don't always involve university, but it was a dream of Oprah's, and before she won the competition, she thought it was a dream that would never come true, but now it was actually happening. Oprah had secured the ticket to her very bright future. Chapter 4. The first black news anchor in Nashville. Oprah really loved studying at the University of Tennessee. She made lots of friends and professors, and peers alike knew Oprah was very smart and had a bright future ahead of her. At the end of high school, Oprah started working at WVOL, a local black radio station, where the managers and producers liked her so much that they asked her to continue to work for them during her time at the University of Tennessee. This was a big deal. Usually, university students are not old enough or experienced enough to do professional jobs until they graduate with a degree in order to be qualified. But as we already know, many adults saw a potential in Oprah, just like her grandmother, Hattie Mae did. Having the job at WVOL helped Oprah get her name out into the world, and soon another opportunity presented itself in Nashville. This time, a TV station wanted to hire Oprah to read the headlines on the mighty news. She would be the first black news anchor in Nashville. On WLAC-TV, Oprah was only in her early 20s and she was already making history. But she wouldn't stop there. Oprah's star was on the rise. While she was still at university, a news channel in Baltimore contacted her with a job offer. She didn't know what to do. Should she stay at university and get her degree? Probably, Oprah thought, or maybe she should leave for the job. Oprah asked herself, don't folks go to college so they can get jobs? And now she was getting a job, a good job. It was just in a different timeline than expected, and so she didn't know if it was right. Oprah decided it would be okay to do things out of the expected order sometimes. One of her professors encouraged her to take the job in Baltimore, which really helped Oprah feel like she was making the right choice for herself. She had wondered how she'd fit in biology class with her job, but her professor laughed at her worries. "That's why you go to school, fool," he told Oprah. So Oprah went to Baltimore thinking she had made it, that all of her dreams had come true. Everything was going to be great. Luck is a matter of preparation meeting opportunity. Seneca. Chapter 5. Trouble in Baltimore. Baltimore was supposed to be Oprah's big break. To her, this job as a co-host on a news show meant all of her dreams were coming true. She had come from an impoverished upbringing and was now breaking barriers Hattie Mae could have only dreamed about Oprah breaking. Oprah had made it. She had reached the top. Not so fast. Baltimore was not as welcoming a place to Oprah as Nashville had been, and it started to make Oprah nervous. She'd never had trouble making friends before, but now she was having a difficult time finding people who really understood her. Her new company didn't understand her either. Before Oprah started her new job, her bosses were trying to come up with a catchy way to get people talking about the show. They came up with an idea. The question, "What is an Oprah?" was plastered on billboards and buses all over the city. No one knew the answer, and it got the city talking. "Do you know what an Oprah is?" people would ask their friends. No one knew. How could they find out? By watching the show. Looking back on this, it is easy to understand why this kind of question is not appropriate. It tells people that this name is so different, so wild and unheard of, that it could not possibly belong to a human. An Oprah is just so crazy and wacky and silly, instead of it just being a name you might have never heard before. What is an Oprah was a bad idea. Oprah later said she felt like she didn't live up to the hype of the marketing campaign. There was one silver lining for Oprah in Baltimore, meeting Gayle King, a woman who would soon become her very best friend. Almost everything else was a nightmare. People were expecting this big something, she said. The build-up was so strong. And I'm just a coloured girl with a lot of hair, and everybody's like, "What? That's what an Oprah is? She's not all that." What is an Oprah? Oprah's co-host, a man named Jerry Turner, did not like her, and he did not try to hide it. Just like being a good friend, being a good colleague means you support the people you work with, and you help them to do their best so that you can do your best. Jerry Turner did not do this for Oprah because he did not want a co-host at all. He wanted the whole show to himself, and he let the big bosses at Baltimore station know it. "Every chance he got, he would embarrass me," Oprah recalled. Oprah would sometimes get emotional reading the news, which Turner hated. He thought it was unprofessional. The producers didn't necessarily disagree. Once, when reporting a story about a house fire, Oprah bought the displaced family warm blankets. She was later scolded for involving herself in the story. Her bosses wanted her to be a journalist and remain neutral and uninvolved. But being a journalist wasn't what Oprah wanted. She started to realize. She didn't want to just report the news, even though that meant she got to be paid to talk. She liked meeting people and hearing their stories and helping them, like the family who survived their house fire. These were people in need, regardless of what her job was. Why shouldn't she be good trying to help them? Oprah's do-gooder attitude just made Jerry Turner dislike her more. The bosses at Baltimore knew things weren't going well between Jerry and Oprah, and they were left with a choice. They could either choose Jerry, who was their longtime star, or they could choose Oprah, who was brand new and still getting used to the job. Who do you think they chose? If you guessed Jerry Turner, you were right. Oprah was called into her boss's office on 1st of April 1977 and was told she would be transferred to a job where she was almost never on camera. This was a demotion, but her bosses made it sound like a great opportunity. Oprah thought they were pranking her with an April Fool's Day joke, until she realized they were serious. She was so humiliated, but she had to go along with the changes for fear of being fired. She didn't have another job waiting for her, so if she had quit, she would have been out of money with no way to pay her rent or bills. It was such a hard position to be in. All of a sudden, Oprah went from living her dream of getting paid to talk to doing odds and ends around the production studio. Challenges are gifts that force us to search for a new center of gravity. Don't fight them, just find a new way to stand. Oprah. Chapter 6. People are talking. Oprah wouldn't be on the bottom for long. There was another person at the Baltimore station who really liked her and saw a lot of promise. His name was Richard Scher, and in 1978 he and Oprah launched a talk show called People Are Talking at the same station that had demoted Oprah down the ladder just a year earlier. Critics were not convinced, but it didn't matter, because viewers loved their chemistry. Now Oprah had Gail, Richard Scher, and her own drawer full of cookies in his kitchen, and her People Are Talking producer Arlene Weiner on her side. She had finally made some friends and was starting to find her community. Having a producer as a friend was a favorable position to be in. After all, this is what helped give Jerry Turner the edge to push Oprah out years earlier. But Oprah didn't use her relationship with Arlene to lord over anyone else. Instead, she saw Arlene as a mentor and someone to look up to. This was big. Arlene also had a lot of money, and Oprah didn't know anyone who had a lot of money. When she would go over to Arlene's house for dinner or coffee, she would look out into the garden and count the trees on Arlene's lawn. I determined then that's what really rich is, being able to have 6 trees in your yard. Unlike her other jobs where she read headlines and talked about the news, AM Chicago was more fun, but it left more room for error. Guests came on to teach Oprah how to cook a specific dish. Oprah didn't cook at all, but her mistakes only made her audience love her more. She was humble, she was funny, and viewers loved funny. They craved funny. They weren't getting funny from any other morning show, and Oprah was happy. Unlike being in Baltimore, which always felt a little foreign to Oprah, Chicago truly felt like home. In fact, Oprah always felt an overwhelming sense of belonging whenever she'd fly somewhere else and then come back to Chicago. She would see the skyline of the city and feel like it was where she was meant to be. That was important to Oprah, and it was reflected in her work on the TV show. At the last minute, Oprah submitted her tape. She hoped it wasn't too late, but she wouldn't know for sure for a few weeks. She was certain there was a lot of competition, and Oprah was not convinced she would beat everyone else who wanted the job. Meanwhile, in Chicago, a man named Dennis Swanson popped a tape into his machine from a woman named Oprah Winfrey, who was working down in Baltimore in a newsroom. He saw her cheerful disposition and heard her enthusiastic voice, and decided she was right for the job. He thought Oprah had a spark he hadn't seen from watching any of the other tapes. He wanted to know more about Oprah. Maybe she was what AM Chicago was missing. Back in Baltimore, things were still going well for Oprah. She had Gail, her BFF, and she was having fun at work with Arlene. Part of her was hoping she would hear back from someone at AM Chicago, but another part of her was thinking, well, this job feels pretty safe. I don't really want to take another risk anytime soon. Even though it was a few years earlier, the memory of her big failure co-hosting with Jerry Turner made her nervous about taking yet another job in a new city. What if she failed again? What if she couldn't find a friend in the newsroom? Or worse, what if people made fun of her name again? Maybe it would be a good thing if she didn't get the job. Then the phone rang. It was Dennis Swanson. He told Oprah he thought she was going to be a big star in Chicago. Oprah had butterflies in her stomach, but they were excited butterflies. She decided to take a leap of faith and moved up to Chicago to host their morning talk show. Unlike her other jobs where she read headlines and talked about the news, AM Chicago was more fun, but it left more room for error. Guests came on to teach Oprah how to cook a specific dish. Oprah didn't cook at all. But her mistakes only made her audience love her more. She was humble, she was funny, and viewers loved funny. They craved funny. They weren't getting funny from any other morning show. And Oprah was happy. Unlike being in Baltimore, which always felt a little foreign to Oprah, Chicago truly felt like home. In fact, Oprah always felt an overwhelming sense of belonging whenever she'd fly somewhere else and then come back to Chicago. She would see the skyline of the city and feel like it was where she was meant to be. That was more important to Oprah, and it was reflected in her work on the TV show. Within a month, AM Chicago's ratings had skyrocketed to the top. Everyone was watching and loving Oprah. She was even in a movie, Stephen Spielberg's The Color Purple, and she was nominated for an Academy Award. She was becoming a star, just like Dennis Swanson said she would be, which gave the producers an idea. The Oprah Winfrey Show. Turn your wounds into wisdom. Oprah. You are not built to shrink down to less, but to blossom into more. Oprah. Chapter 7. The Oprah Winfrey Show. AM Chicago became the Oprah Winfrey Show in September 1986. Now everyone in the country could watch Oprah if they wanted to. Was this it? This time it was undeniable. Oprah was finally really and truly being paid to talk, as she had declared she would when she was a little girl to her grandmother, Hattie Mae. But the pressure was also on. Chicago already loved her. What about the rest of America? Oprah. She only had a short amount of time to convince people her show was worth watching. She had to think big. At first, she thought she would need a big famous name to help draw people into watching her, but Oprah couldn't convince a celebrity to come on the show. They didn't know who she was and they didn't care. She would send celebrities gifts like mink teddy bears, hoping that would make them want to come and talk to her, but it didn't work. She needed another plan, or she was going to crash and burn before she even got a chance to show the world what she could do. She had to come up with another way to get the audience excited. People like talking to their friends, she thought. So what if she became the audience's friend? She needed to talk to them like she was in their living room discussing the things women cared about, the same things Oprah and Gayle cared about. How do you make a friend? Sometimes it happens when you let your guard down in front of other people and show them that you are a regular human being. So the cameras turned on Oprah. on the very first episode of her show, and Oprah, who was nervous, blurted, "I have hives under my armpits," right out to the whole world. The audience laughed and laughed and laughed. They weren't making fun of her. They weren't thinking, "What is an Oprah?" They were relating to her. This was any TV host's dream. Oprah was delighted. The producers were delighted. And the viewers kept coming back for more. Oprah was like a friend that everyone wanted to sit with at lunch, not because they wore the best clothes or had the most money, but because she was a good listener, a good speaker, and helped you understand, learn, and care about things. America had been looking for a friend like Oprah Winfrey, but she was still new on the job and had a lot to learn. As a child, Oprah famously said she wanted to be paid to talk. But what does that mean? Does it mean you just get to go in front of an audience and talk about whatever you want and whatever you think? And since you have the microphone, you automatically get to be right? Some people out there might say yes, but not Oprah. She knew the real secret of having a talk show: listening. She listened to her friends and her viewers. She listened to the people who worked with her. She even listened to the people who didn't agree with her, like people who believed she wasn't worthy of her success because she was black or because she was a woman. Instead of saying, "I don't care what you say, it's my show," Oprah started inviting people with different views to come and talk to her, which helped people at home have those same conversations with their families and friends. All of a sudden, everyone at home was watching Oprah, and not just watching the fun shows about makeovers and weddings and exercising. They were learning new perspectives on topics like race and gender and politics. Oprah Winfrey, the person who used to cry while reading the headlines in Baltimore, who was humiliated because another colleague wanted the spotlight all to himself, and who wasn't totally sure if leaving Baltimore for Chicago was a good choice, was now captivating viewers across the country. It was her empathy and understanding of humans that pulled them in. Her roller coaster was still climbing up, up, up. Surround yourself only with the people who are going to take you higher. Oprah. Chapter 8. Staying humble. By the 1990s, Oprah was a true celebrity. Remember when celebrities didn't want to come and talk to Oprah because they didn't know who she was? Suddenly, everyone wanted to come on Oprah's show because they knew everyone at home was watching her on television. She was getting so famous that she started her own products company called Harpo Studios. Hint: write Oprah backwards. What does that spell? Publicists were begging for their clients, celebrities, authors, politicians, even famous pets, to get a chance to be on her show. She was the most popular ticket in town. Once the most famous actor at the time, Tom Cruise, jumped up and down on Oprah's sofa during the show. President Obama and Michelle Obama even came to talk to her. You couldn't imagine that happening when Oprah first started, and neither could she. If she had wanted to, Oprah could have said, I don't want to talk to any regular people anymore. I just want famous people to come on my show. Her popularity and wealth could have easily made Oprah forget about her humble beginnings. But Oprah knew that it was actually the regular people, like you and me, that her audience loved hearing about and listening to the most. That was why they wanted to watch her show every day. It was fun to see celebrities too, of course, but you could see celebrities on any television show. You could only see Oprah on one, the Oprah Winfrey Show. She was a household name, but Oprah knew a little something about being a good colleague and friend to those who had helped her reach success. Remember Dennis Swanson, who saw Oprah's AM Chicago audition tape and hired her? Oprah still talks about him and credits him for her success, even though it's been over 30 years. He was the first person Oprah mentioned in her acceptance speech at the Golden Globes. Oprah is the most famous and influential businesswoman in the world, but she is always giving credit and thanks to others who came before her. What kind of person does that make her? Being humble and having humility makes people like you, even as you become rich and famous. Oprah never forgets the little people, but more importantly, she never thinks of anyone as little people to begin with. To stay grounded throughout her meteoric rise to celebrity, Oprah kept a framed photo of her grandmother, Hattie Mae, on her desk. The photo is the only one Oprah has of her grandmother, and she is wearing her maid's uniform. Oprah says that photo reminds her that she is the dream of her grandmother, who probably could have never imagined a future this bright for the young toddler who used to captivate churches. But Oprah wanted to do more. She thought about Hattie Mae and the chances she never got. She thought about her mother working long hours cleaning houses and being discriminated against for the color of her skin. She thought about her father, who helped give her the structure she needed to achieve her dreams when she was a high school and college student. She thought about herself as a young girl with big dreams, hoping someone, somewhere, someday would give her an opportunity to shine. She'd had that opportunity, and now she wanted to make sure others like her were given that opportunity too. She wanted to give back. The happiness you feel is in direct proportion to the love you give. Chapter 9. Oprah's Intention. By the new millennium, Oprah wasn't just everyone's favorite talk show host. She was everyone's favorite celebrity. People trusted her. People wanted to be like her or be her best friend. And Oprah had a way of making you feel like if she met you, she might want to be your best friend too, even through a television. That's magical. So Oprah started a book club where she recommended her favorite titles that you could go and buy in the shops. And each book would have a little sticker on it to say it was Oprah's favorite. If your book was selected by Oprah, you could bet that your book would be a huge success. People marveled at her ability to sell a book, and that made them think, if Oprah can make someone drive to a bookstore and spend £20 on a book because she said it's good, what else could Oprah get people to buy? They started sending Oprah products, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of products, jumpers and fridges and snow boots and even brownies. Stores sent jewellery and expensive bags and cameras and even a panini maker. Oprah started picking out the products she likes most. And every Thanksgiving, she'd dedicate a whole episode to telling the audiences at home about her favourite things ahead of the shopping season. But Oprah wanted to step it up. She started shifting her focus for the show around this time. Now it was less about living your best life and more about setting your intention. What does that mean? For Oprah, it meant asking, why are we doing this? For everything she and her producers chose to do on the show. It wasn't enough to answer, well, it would be fun, or because people will love it. There had to be a deeper meaning or intention behind everything Oprah did on and off the show. She decided that everyone who went to the live taping of her Favorite Things episode would get to take home every single product for free. She chose those audiences very carefully. One year, the audience was full of school teachers who thought they were there for a show about education. But then, faint jingle bells would start to ring, and everyone at home would get to watch everyone. Shock as the audience screamed and jumped up and down when Oprah would announce that they were her favorite things. The intention behind this was being able to make sure all of these free gifts were going home with people who truly deserved to have them. But Oprah always wanted to do more. She had an idea to give away 11 cars to people who really needed cars. Wow, but it still wasn't enough. What if she could give away a car to every single person in the audience? Producers of the show remember working really hard to help Oprah's visions come true. They sent out a survey to people who wanted to sit in the audience to see if they could learn more about how they got to work or what they needed. Eventually, they put together an audience of hundreds of people who had said a new car would change their lives for the better, and gave them all a set of keys to brand new cars. Oprah cared about her fans and viewers so much. Oprah was so happy doing the Oprah Winfrey show. She got to help people, meet people, and of course, she was getting paid to talk. What could be better? For years, Oprah starred on her own show, but she was also doing tons of work behind the scenes. She was committed to changing the world, and she knew that talking about changing the world was only one part of the bigger picture. All of a sudden, Oprah was the world's most powerful and richest African American woman. But that kind of visibility and power came with responsibility to do good. She started the Oprah's Angel Network, where she gave lots of money towards helping underprivileged kids get better, richer, fuller educations. She was named one of the most influential women and one of the most generous. Chapter 10. Giving Back. Oprah could not keep up the pace of her professional life forever. In 2010, she felt that it was time to say goodbye to the Oprah Winfrey Show. A voice deep inside of her told her that she had done everything she could on the show and it was time to leave. People were sad, and so many tried to convince her to stay on the air forever. But Oprah did what she did best. She listened to herself. She knew people felt like Oprah was leaving them, but of course, she would never be truly out of the picture. Oprah was already an icon all over the world, though she created a production company to help give others a voice and a platform in her absence. She remained steadfast in her decision that there would be no more Oprah Winfrey Show. It was a difficult decision, but ultimately a necessary one. For the show's finale, Oprah's top producer, Sherry Salata, planned major surprises. It was a lot of work to surprise Oprah because she was so involved in everything the show did. But Sherry convinced Oprah to leave the finale shows alone so the producers could plan something really big. Boy, Oprah was shocked. The finale was taped in a big stadium in Chicago, and all of her celebrity friends came to say goodbye and wish her well. Remember when Oprah couldn't convince any celebrities to join the show? Things had definitely changed. It wasn't the celebrities that made the finale so special to Oprah. However, even though it was fun to see her friends, the most touching moment of all was when 400 Morehouse College graduates walked on stage. These 400 men had their university educations funded by Oprah. She stepped in because none of these boys would have been able to afford to go to university. Now they came back to thank her and walked on stage as Christine Chenoweth sang For Good from her Broadway show Wicked. Oprah started to cry with happiness, just like the producers knew she would. The audience was crying too. It was the perfect ending to the show and the perfect beginning to a life full of giving back even more. Since leaving the Oprah Winfrey Show, Oprah has stayed in the public eye as a force for good. She is no longer being paid to talk, technically, but she doesn't need to. Now she travels the globe as a beacon of hope and inspiration to so many. People really listen to what she had to say, perhaps because she spent so much time really listening to others. She has written books, performed in movies, and made education a priority. In 2018, Oprah was awarded the Cecil D. Meal Award for Lifetime Achievement at the Golden Globes, and her speech drew a standing ovation as well as millions of views on the internet. One of the things she said really stuck. I've interviewed and portrayed people who've withstood some of the ugliest things life can throw at you. But the one quality all of them seem to share is an ability to maintain hope for a brighter morning, even during our darkest nights. So I want all the girls watching here now to know that a new day is on the horizon. And when that new day finally dawns, it will be because of a lot of magnificent women. Oprah. In making that speech, it felt as if Oprah was handing off her brightly burning torch to a world of little girls with dreams of becoming the next powerful public figure. When Oprah was a little girl, Hattie Mae hoped her granddaughter would have a life full of opportunities she could only dream about. Now, Oprah is wishing all of those same dreams for you. Learn to run the show like Oprah. 10 key lessons from Oprah's life. 1. Learn from the people in your life who love you. Hattie Mae was Oprah's biggest fan and her greatest teacher. Though she was much older than Oprah, she had a life experience that helped light the way for Oprah's future. Hattie Mae's life gave Oprah perspective. There are many people in your life who have different perspectives on things based on their own experiences. It is helpful to learn how others see the world because it will help you see it clearer. 2. Always try to do right even in the wrong circumstances. Oprah had a hard childhood because of her strained relationship with her mother, whom she was sent to live with when Hattie Mae got sick, but she always tried to be her best. 3. Work on your craft. No one wakes up in the morning and becomes the best at what they do with no time, effort, or practice. When Oprah was younger, she realized her favorite things all involved language arts, reading, writing, and public speaking. So she worked on making herself better at all of those things. She read books, she wrote stories, and she even entered a public speaking competition and won. All of this work led her to her future. It paid off. 4. Just because no one else has done it before doesn't mean you can't be the first. Oprah was the first Black news anchor in Baltimore. That's huge. That means that before Oprah, there was no representation of people who looked like her in the TV news space. Oprah knew that didn't mean there wasn't a place for her, but she also knew it meant she'd have to work twice as hard to break that ceiling. We're glad she did. 5. Don't give up. Life is not easy. Oprah knows this from her time working at the news station. People were mean to her because of the color of her skin and her name. Some people tried to sabotage her career and push her out by giving her roles she was too senior for. Oprah stood tall and proud and kept her eyes on her goals. 6. It's okay to step out of your comfort zone. Oprah was getting comfortable in Baltimore and almost didn't apply for the AM Chicago job that led her to her own television show. It's nice to feel secure, but growth is necessary. 7. Don't be afraid to be silly. People love silly. Being successful doesn't mean being serious all of the time. Remember Oprah's first show when she told the audience she had hives under her armpits? The audience loved that. Don't be afraid to show your personality in your work. It may even help you make friends. 8. Stay humble and remember who helped you along the way. When you become really successful, it's easy to forget the people who helped you get to that place. It's important to credit those who came before you. Oprah keeps a photo of her grandmother on her desk and always remembers to thank those who took chances on her early in her career. She never got too big for her boots. 9. Do with intention. Always ask yourself why you're doing something. Is it helping someone else? Is it making the world better? Is it adding to your goals? Oprah always set her intention to make her work meaningful. You can do the same. 10. Give back. Oprah gives back in both big and small ways. You don't have to be a millionaire or a billionaire to make a difference for someone in need. Start now. We have now reached the ending of our book. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. If you could, please press the subscribe button for more. Bye!